2001, A Space Odyssey. Screenplay by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. Part 1. Africa, 3 million years ago. Views of African drylands. Drought. The remorseless drought has lasted now for 10 million years, and would not end for another million. The reign of terrible lizards has long since passed. But here on the continent, which would one day be known as Africa, the battle for survival has reached a new climax of ferocity, and the victor was not yet in sight. In this dry and barren land, only the small, or the swift, or the fierce could flourish, or even hope to exist. Interior and exterior caves. Moonwatcher. The man-apes of the field had none of these attributes, and they were on the long, pathetic road to racial extinction. About 20 of them occupied a group of caves overlooking a small parched valley, divided by a sluggish brown stream. The tribe had always been hungry, and now it was starving. As the first dim glow of dawn creeps into the cave, Moonwatcher discovers that his father has died during the night. He did not know the Old One was his father, for such a relationship was beyond his understanding, but as he stands looking down at the emaciated body, he feels something akin to sadness. Then he carries his dead father out of the cave and leaves him for the hyenas. Among his kind, Moonwatcher is almost a giant. He is nearly 5 feet high, and though badly undernourished, weighs over 100 pounds. His hairy, muscular body is quite man-like, and his head is already nearer man than ape. The forehead is low, there are great ridges over the eye sockets, yet he unmistakably holds in his genes the promise of humanity. As he looks out now upon the hostile world, there is already something in his gaze beyond the grasp of any ape. In those dark, deep-set eyes is a dawning awareness, the first intimations of intelligence, which would not fulfill itself for another 2 million years. As the dawn sky brightens, Moonwatcher and his tribe reach the shallow stream. The others are already there. They were there on the other side every day. That did not make it any less annoying. There are 18 of them, and it is impossible to distinguish them from the members of Moonwatcher's own tribe. As they see him coming, the others begin to angrily dance and shriek on their side of the stream, and his own people reply in kind. The confrontation lasts a few minutes, then the display dies out as quickly as it had begun, and everyone drinks his fill of the muddy water. Honor has been satisfied. Each group has staked its claim to its own territory. Moonwatcher and his companions search for berries, fruit and leaves, and fight off pangs of hunger, while all around them, competing with them for the same fodder, is a potential source of more food than they could ever hope to eat. Yet all the thousands of tons of meat roaming over the parched savanna and through the brush is not only beyond their reach, the idea of eating it is beyond their imagination. They are slowly starving to death in the midst of plenty. The tribe slowly wanders across the bare, flat countryside, foraging for roots and occasional berries. 8 of them are irregularly strung out on the open plain, about 50 feet apart. The ground is flat for miles around. Suddenly, Moonwatcher becomes aware of a lion stalking them about 300 yards away. Defenseless and with nowhere to hide, they scatter in all directions, but the lion brings one to the ground. It had not been a good day, though as Moonwatcher had no real remembrance of the past, he could not compare one day with another. But on the way back to the caves, he finds a hive of bees in the stump of a dead tree, and so enjoys the finest delicacy his people could ever know. Of course, he also collects a good many stings, but He scarcely notices them. He is now as near to contentment as he is ever likely to be, for though he is still hungry, he is not actually weak with hunger, and that was the most any hominid could hope for. Over the valley a full moon rises, and a cold wind blows down from the distant mountains. It would be very cold tonight, but cold like hunger was not a matter for any real concern. It was merely part of the background of life. This little sun that only shone at night and gave no warmth was dangerous. There could be enemies abroad. Moonwatcher crawls out of the cave, clambers onto a large boulder beside the entrance, and squats there where he can survey the valley. If any hunting beast approached, he would have time to get back to the relative safety of the cave. Of all the creatures who have ever lived on Earth, Moonwatcher's race was the first to raise their eyes with interest to the moon, and though he could not remember it when he was young, Moonwatcher would reach out and try to touch its ghostly face. Now he knew that he would have to find a tree that was high enough. He stirs when shrieks and screams echo up the slope from one of the lower caves. He does not need to hear the occasional growl of the lion to know what is happening. Down there in the darkness, old One-Eye and his family are dying. The thought that he might help in some way never crosses Moonwatcher's mind. The harsh logic of survival rules out such fancies. Every cave is silent, lest it attract disaster. And in the caves, in tortured spells of fitful dozing and fearful waiting, were gathered the nightmares of generations yet to come. The others are growing desperate. The forage on their side of the valley is almost exhausted. Perhaps they realize that Moonwatcher's tribe has lost 3 of its number during the night, for they chose this morning to break the truce. When they meet at the river in the still misty dawn, there is a deeper and more menacing tone in their challenge. The noisy but usually harmless confrontation lasts only a few seconds before the invasion begins. In an uncertainly moving horde, the others cross the river, shrieking threats and hunched for action. They are led by a big-toothed hominid of Moonwatcher's own size and age. Startled and frightened, the tribe retreats before the first advance, throwing nothing more substantial than imprecations at the invaders. Moonwatcher moves with them, his mind a mist of rage and confusion. To be driven from their own territory is a great badness, but to lose the river is death. He does not know what to do. It is a situation beyond his experience. Then he becomes dimly aware that the others are slowing down and advancing with obvious reluctance. The further they move from their own side, the more uncertain and unhappy they become. Only Big Tooth still retains any of his original drive, and he is rapidly being separated from his followers. As he sees this, Moonwatcher's own morale immediately revives. He slows down his retreat and begins to make reassuring noises to his companions. Novel sensations fill his dim mind, the first faint precursors of bravery and leadership. Before he realizes it, he's face to face with Big Tooth, and the 2 tribes come to a halt many paces away. The disorganized and unscientific conflict could have ended quickly if either had used his fist as a club, but this innovation still lay hundreds of thousands of years in the future. Instead, the slowly weakening fighters claw and scratch and try to bite each other. Rolling over and over, they come to a patch of stony ground, and when they reach it, Moonwatcher is on top. By chance, he chooses this moment to grab the hair on Big Tooth's scalp and bang his head on the ground. The resulting crack is so satisfactory and produces such an immediate weakening in Big Tooth's resistance that he quickly repeats it. Even when Big Tooth ceases to move for some time, Moonwatcher keeps up the exhilarating game. With shrieks of panic, the others retreat back across the stream. The defenders cautiously pursue them as far as the water's edge. Dozing fitfully and weakened by his struggle, Moonwatcher is startled by a sound. He sits up in the fetid darkness of the cave, straining his senses out into the night, and fear creeps slowly into his soul. Never in his life, already twice as long as most members of his species could expect, he has heard a sound like this. The great cats approach in silence. The only thing that betrayed them was a rare slide of earth or the occasional cracking of a twig. Yet this is a continuing crunching noise that grows steadily louder. It seemed that some enormous beast was moving through the night, making no attempt at concealment and ignoring all obstacles. Then there came a sound which Moonwatcher could not possibly have identified, for it had never been heard before in the history of this planet. Moonwatcher comes face to face with the new rock when he leads the tribe down to the river in the first light of morning. He had almost forgotten the terror of the night because nothing had happened after that initial noise, so he did not even associate this strange thing with danger or fear. There was nothing the least alarming about it. It is a cube about 15 feet on a side, and it is made of some completely transparent material. Indeed, it is not easy to see except when the light of the sun glints on its edges. There are no natural objects to which Moonwatcher can compare this apparition. Though he is wisely cautious of most new things, he does not hesitate to walk up to it. As nothing happens, he puts out his hand and feels a warm, hard surface. After several minutes of intense thought, he arrives at a brilliant explanation. It is a rock, of course, and it must have grown during the night. There are many plants that can do this. White, pulpy things shaped like pebbles that seem to shoot up in the hours of darkness. It is true that they are small and round, whereas this is large and square. But greater and larger philosophers than Moonwatcher would be prepared to overlook equally striking exceptions to their own laws. This really superb piece of abstract thinking leads Moonwatcher to a deduction which he immediately puts to a test. The white round pebble plants are very tasty, though there were a few that made one violently sick. Perhaps this square one? A few licks and attempted nibbles quickly disillusion him. There's no nourishment here, so like a sensible hominid, he continues on his way to the river and forgets all about the cube. They are still 100 yards from the new rock when the sound begins. It is quite soft, and it stops them in their tracks, so that they stand paralyzed on the trail with their jaws hanging. A simple, maddeningly repetitious rhythm pulses out of the crystal cube and hypnotizes all who come within its spell. For the first time, and the last, for 2 million years, the sound of drumming is heard in Africa. The throbbing grows louder and more insistent. Presently, the hominids begin to move forward like sleepwalkers towards the source of that magnetic sound. Sometimes they take a little dancing step as their blood responds to the rhythms that their descendants would not create for ages yet. Totally entranced, they gather around the cube, forgetting the hardships of the day, the perils of the approaching dusk, and the hunger in their bellies. Now spinning wheels of light begin to merge, and the spokes fuse into luminous bars that slowly recede into the distance, rotating on their axes as they do, and the hominids watch, wide-eyed, mesmerized captives of the crystal cube. Then by some magic, though it was no more magical than all that had gone before, a perfectly normal scene appears. It is as if a cubical block has been carved out of the day and shifted into night. Inside that block is a group of 4 hominids, who might have been members of Moonwatcher's own tribe, eating chunks of meat. The carcass of a warthog lies near them. This little family of male and female and 2 children is gorged and replete, with sleek and glossy pelts, and this was a condition of life that Moonwatcher had never imagined. From time to time they stir lazily, as they loll at ease near the entrance of their cave, apparently at peace with the world. The spectacle of domestic bliss merges into a totally different scene. The family is no longer reposing peacefully outside its cave. It is foraging, searching for food, like any normal hominids. A small warthog ambles past the group of browsing humanoids without giving them more than a glance, for they have never been the slightest danger to its species. But that happy state of affairs is about to end. The big male suddenly bends down, picks up a heavy stone lying at his feet, and hurls it at the unfortunate pig. The stone descends upon its skull, making exactly the same noise that Moonwatcher had produced in his now almost forgotten encounter with Big Tooth. The result, too, is much the same. The warthog gives one amazed, indignant squeal and collapses in a motionless heap. Then the whole sequence begins again, but this time it unfolds itself with incredible slowness. Every detail of the movement can be followed. The stone arches leisurely through the air. The pig crumples up and sinks to the ground. There the scene freezes for long moments, the slayer standing motionless above the slain, the first of all weapons in his hand. The scene suddenly fades out. The cube is no more than a glimmering outline in the darkness. The hominids stir as if awakening from a dream, realizing where they are, and scuttle back to their caves. They have no conscious memory of what they had seen, but that night, as he sits brooding at the entrance of his lair, his ears attuned to the noises of the world around him, Moonwatcher feels the first faint twinges of a new and potent emotion, the urge to kill. He had taken his first steps towards humanity. Babies were born and sometimes lived, feeble, toothless. 30-year-olds died, and the lion took its toll in the night. The others threatened daily across the river, and the tribe prospered. In the course of a single year, Moonwatcher and his companions had changed almost beyond recognition. They had become plump as the family in the cave, who no longer haunted their dreams. They had learned their lessons well. Now they could handle all the stone tools and weapons that the cube had revealed to them. They were no longer half-numbed with starvation, and they had time for both leisure and for the first rudiments of thought. Their new way of life was casually accepted, and they did not associate it in any way with the crystal cube still standing outside their cave. But no utopia is perfect, and this one had 2 blemishes. The first was the marauding lion, whose passion for hominids seemed to have grown even stronger now that they were better nourished. The second was the tribe from across the river, for somehow the others had survived, and had stubbornly refused to die of starvation. With the partly devoured carcass of a warthog laid out on the ground at the point he hoped the boulder would impact, Moonwatcher and 3 of his bravest companions wait for 2 consecutive nights. On the 3rd, the lion comes, betraying his presence by a small pebble slide. When they can hear the lion below, softly tearing at the meat, they strain themselves against the massive boulder. The sound of the lion stops. He is listening. Again they silently heave against the enormous stone, exerting the final limits of their strength. The rock begins to tip to a new balance point. The lion twitches alert to the sound, but having no fear of these creatures, he makes his first of 2 mistakes, which will cost him his life. He goes back to his meal. The rock moves slowly over the ledge, picking up speed with amazing suddenness. It strikes a projection in the cliff about 15 feet above the ground, which deflects its path outward. Just at this instant, the lion reacts instinctively and leaps away from the face of the cliff directly onto the path of the onrushing boulder. He has combined the errors of overconfidence and bad luck. The next morning they find the lion in front of the cave. They also find one of their tribe who had incautiously peeped out to see what was happening, and was apparently killed by a small rock torn loose by the boulder, but this was a small price to pay for such a great victory. And then, one night the crystal cube was gone, and not even Moonwatcher ever thought of it again. He was still wholly unaware of all it had done. From their side of the stream, in the never-violated safety of their own territory, the others see Moonwatcher and 14 males of his tribe appear from behind a small hillock overlooking the stream, silhouetted against the dawn sky. The others begin to scream their daily challenge, but today something is different, though the others do not immediately recognize this fact. Instead of joining the verbal onslaught as they had always done, Moonwatcher and his small band descend from the rise, begin to move forward to the stream with a quiet purposefulness never before seen. As the others watch the figures silently approaching in the morning mist, they become aware of the terrible strangeness of this encounter, and their rage gradually subsides down to an uneasy silence. At the water's edge, Moonwatcher and his band stop. They carry their bone clubs and bone knives. Led by One Ear, the others half-heartedly resume the battle chant, but they are suddenly confronted with a vision that cuts the sound from their throat and strikes terror into their hearts. Moonwatcher, who has been partly concealed by 2 males that walked before him, thrusts his arm into the air. In his hand he holds a stout tree branch. Mounted atop the branch is the bloody head of the lion, its mouth jammed open with a stick, displaying its frightful fangs. The others gape in fearful disbelief at this display of power. Moonwatcher stands motionless, thrusting the lion's head high, and then with his majestic deliberation, still carrying his mangled standard above his head, he begins to cross the stream, followed by his band. The others fade back from the stream, seeming to lack even the ability to flee. Moonwatcher steps ashore and walks to One Ear, who stands unsurely in front of his band. Though he is a veteran of numerous combats at the water's edge, One Ear has never been attacked by an enemy who had not first displayed his fighting rage, and he had never before been attacked with a weapon. One Ear merely looks up at the raised club until the heavy thigh bone of an antelope brings the darkness down around him. The others stare in wonder at Moonwatcher's power. Moonwatcher surveys the scene. Now he was the master of the world, and he was not sure what to do next, but he would think of something. We see Earth from 200 miles up. 1,000 megaton nuclear bomb in orbit above the Earth, a Russian insignia, and CCCP markings. We see an American 1,000 megaton bomb in orbit above the Earth, then a French bomb, a German bomb, a Chinese bomb. By the year 2001, overpopulation has replaced the problem of starvation, but this was ominously offset by the absolute and utter perfection of the weapon. Hundreds of giant bombs have been placed in perpetual orbit above the Earth. They were capable of incinerating the entire Earth's surface from an altitude of 100 miles. Matters were further complicated by the presence of 27 nations in the nuclear club. There had been no deliberate or accidental use of nuclear weapons since World War II, and some people felt secure in this knowledge. But to others, the situation seemed comparable to an airline with a perfect safety record. It showed admirable care and skill, but no one expected it to last forever. We see Orion 3, a spacecraft, in flight away from Earth, 200 miles altitude. The passenger area, Dr. Heywood Floyd is the only passenger in an elegant cabin designed for 30 people. He is asleep. His pen floats near his hand. The pilot and co-pilot. Floyd can be seen asleep on a small TV monitor. The stewardess is putting on lipstick. She sees the pen. The stewardess goes back to the passenger area and rescues the pen and clips it back in Floyd's pocket. Space Station 5. The raw sunlight of space dazzles from polished metal surfaces of the slowly revolving 1,000-foot diameter space station. Drifting in the same orbit we see swept back Titov V spacecraft, also the almost aspherical Ares IB. Floyd is now awake, but groggy. He looks out the window. The co-pilot in radio communication with the space station. The Orion spacecraft in docking approach. The Earth is seen in breathtaking view in the background. Inside docking control, we see Orion 3 maneuvering in the background. From the docking port, we see Orion 3 inching in to complete its docking. We see various windowed booths inside the docking port. We see the pilot and the co-pilot inside the Orion 3 cockpit. A receptionist stands at the space station reception area. Miller enters, hurrying. He goes to the elevator and presses the button. He waits impatiently. We see the elevator indicator working. The elevator door opens and Floyd is seen unstrapping himself. The elevator girl is seated by the door. "Oh, good morning, Dr. Floyd. I'm Nick Miller." "How do you do, Mr. Miller?" "I'm terribly sorry. I was just on my way down to meet you. I saw your ship dock, and I knew I had plenty of time, and I was on my way out of the office when suddenly the phone rang." "Oh, please, don't worry about it." "Well, thank you very much for being so understanding." "Please, really, it doesn't matter." "Well, did you have a pleasant flight?" "Yes, very pleasant." "Well, shall we go through documentation?" "Fine." "Will you use number 8, please?" "Thank you, Miss Turner." They enter the passport area, and the receptionist presses English bar on her console and smiles as Floyd goes through. In the automated passport section, they stop in front of a booth featuring a TV screen. "Good morning, and welcome to voice print identification. When you see the red light on, would you please state in the following order: your destination, your nationality, and your full name. Surname first, Christian name, and initial. For example, Moon, American, Smith, John, D. Thank you." There is a pause, and a red bar lights up. "Moon, American, Floyd, Heywood, R." The red light goes off. There is a delay about 2 seconds. The woman's face reappears. "I've always wondered." "Thank you." Despite an excellent and continually improving safety record, there are certain risks inherent in space travel, and an extremely high cost of payload. Because of this, it is necessary for the space carrier to advise you that it cannot be responsible for the return of your body to Earth should you become deceased on the Moon or en route to the Moon. However, it wishes to advise you that insurance covering this contingency is available in the main lounge. Thank you. You are cleared through voice print identification. The lights go off and the woman's face disappears. The men exit the passport area. "I've reserved a table for you in the Earthlight room. Your connecting flight will be leaving in 1 hour." "Oh, that's wonderful." "Let's see, we haven't had the pleasure of a visit from you not since it was 8 or 9 months ago, wasn't it?" "Yes, I think so, just about then." "I suppose you saw the work on our new section while you were docking." "Yes, it's coming along very well." They pass the Vision phone booth. Oh, look, I've got to make a phone call. Why don't you go down into the restaurant and I'll meet you in there? Fine. I'll see you at the bar. Floyd enters the phone booth. Sign on Vision phone screen says temporarily out of order. Sorry. He enters the second booth and sits down. Floyd in the Vision phone. A little girl of 5 answers. Hello. Phone screen displays, your party has not connected Vision. A few seconds later, the screen changes to the image of a child. Hello, darling, how are you? Hello, Daddy, where are you? I'm at Space Station 5, darling, how are you? I'm fine, Daddy, when are you coming home? Well, I hope in a few days, sweetheart. I'm having a party tomorrow. Yes, I know that, sweetheart. Are you coming to my party? No, I'm sorry, darling, I told you I won't be home for a few days. When are you coming home? In 3 days, darling, I hope. Floyd holds up 3 fingers. 1, 2, 3. Can I speak to Mommy? Mommy's out at the hairdresser. Where's Mrs. Brown? She's in the bathroom. Okay, sweetheart. Well, I have to go now. Tell Mommy that I called. And how many days till you come home? 3, darling. 1, 2, 3. Be sure to tell Mommy I called. I will, Daddy. Okay, sweetheart. Have a lovely birthday party tomorrow. Thank you, Daddy. I'll wish you a happy birthday now, and I'll see you soon. All right, darling? Yes, Daddy. Bye-bye now, sweetheart. Goodbye, Daddy. The Vision phone procedure for information. Vision phone procedure for dialing. Good morning, Macy's. Good morning. I'd like the Vision shopper for the pet shop, please. Just one moment. The picture flips, and we see a woman standing in front of a specially designed display screen. Good morning, sir. May I help you? Yes, I'd like to buy a bush baby. Just a moment, sir. The girl keys some inputs, and a moving picture appears on the screen of a cage containing about 6 bush babies, beautifully displayed against a white background. Here you are, sir. Here's a lovely assortment of African bush babies. They are $20 each. Yes, well, pick out a nice one for me, a friendly one, and I'd like it delivered tomorrow. Certainly, sir. Just let us have your name and bank identification for VPI, and then give the name and address of the person you'd like the pet delivered to, and it will be delivered tomorrow. Sometime during this conversation, Floyd sees Elena, Smyslov, and the 2 other Russians pass his Vision phone window. Elena taps and mimes hello, gesturing towards a table behind Floyd where they all sit down. Thank you very much. Floyd Haywood, R., First National Bank of Washington. Please deliver to Miss Josephine Floyd, 9423 Dupre Avenue, Northwest 14. Thank you very much, sir. It will be delivered tomorrow. Well, how nice to see you again, Elena. You're looking wonderful. How nice to see you, Haywood. This is my good friend, Dr. Haywood Floyd. I'd like you to meet Andrei Smyslov. Smyslov and the other 2 Russian women stand up and smile. They shake hands after an introduction and ad-lib hellos. And this is Dr. Kalinin Stritzenevia. The Russians are very warm and friendly. Dr. Floyd, wouldn't you join us for a drink? I'm afraid I've only got a few minutes, but I'd love to. There's a bit of confusion as they all realize there's not enough room for another person at the table. Smyslov offers Floyd his chair and borrows another from a nearby table. What would you like to drink? Oh, I really don't have time for a drink. If it's all right, I'll just sit for a minute and then I'll be off. Are you sure? Yes, really. Thank you very much. Well, how is your lovely wife? She's wonderful. And your charming little daughter? Oh, she's growing up very fast. As a matter of fact, she's 6 tomorrow.
Oh, that's such a delightful age.
How is Gregor?
He's fine, but I'm afraid we don't get a chance to see each other very much these days.
Well, where are all of you off to?
Actually, we're on our way back from the moon. We've just spent 3 months calibrating the new antenna at Chalinko. And what about you?
Well, as it happens, I'm on my way up to the moon.
Are you by any chance going up to your base at Clavius?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. The Russians exchange significant glances. Is there any particular reason why you ask?
Well, Dr. Floyd, I hope you don't think I'm too inquisitive, but perhaps you can clear up the mystery about what's been going on up there.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, it's just for the past 2 weeks there have been some extremely odd things happening at Clavius.
Really?
Yes, well, for one thing, when you phone the base, all you can get is a recording which repeats the phone lines are temporarily out of order.
Well, I suppose they've been having a bit of trouble with some of the equipment.
Yes, well, at first we thought that was the explanation, but it's been going on for the past 10 days.
You mean you haven't been able to get anyone at the base for 10 days?
That's right.
I see.
Another thing, Haywood, 2 days ago, one of our rocket buses was denied permission for an emergency landing at Clavius.
How did they manage to do that without any communication?
Clavius Control came on the air just long enough to transmit their refusal.
Well, that does sound very odd.
Yes, and I'm afraid there's going to be a bit of a row about it. Denying the men permission to land was a direct violation of IAS convention.
Yes, well, I hope the crew got back safely.
Fortunately, they did.
Well, I'm glad about that. The Russians exchange more glances. One of the women offers around a pillbox. Elena and another Russian take one, and the third Russian declines.
Dr. Floyd, at the risk of pressing you on a point you may seem reticent to discuss, may I ask you a straightforward question?
Certainly.
Quite frankly, we have had some very reliable intelligence reports that quite a serious epidemic has broken out at Clavius, something apparently of an unknown origin. Is this in fact what has happened?
A long, awkward pause.
I'm sorry, Dr. Smyslov, but I'm really not at liberty to discuss this. This epidemic could easily spread to our base, Dr. Floyd. We should be given all the facts.
Dr. Smyslov, I'm not permitted to discuss this.
Are you sure you don't want to change your mind about the drink?
No, thank you. And I'm afraid now I really must be going.
Well, I hope you and your wife can come to the IAC conference in June.
We're trying to get there. I hope we can.
Well, Gregor and I will look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to meet all of you. Dr. Smyslov. The Russians all rise, and there are ad-libs of courtesy. Floyd shakes hands and exits. The Russians exchange a few serious paragraphs in Russian. We see the Ares IB in space, Earth now much smaller than as seen from the space station.
The Ares IB has become the standard space station to lunar surface vehicle. It was powered by low-thrust plasma jets, which would continue the mild acceleration for 15 minutes. Then the ship would break the bonds of gravity and be a free and independent planet, circling the Sun in an orbit of its own.
Ares passenger area. Floyd is asleep, stretched out in a chair, covered with blankets which are held secure by straps. A stewardess sits at the other side of the cabin, watching a karate exhibition between two women on television. The elevator entrance door opens, and a second stewardess enters carrying a tray of food. She brings it to the other stewardess.
"Oh, thank you very much. I see he's still sleeping." Yes, he hasn't moved since we left. Stewardess 2 exits into the elevator. The Ares galley area. Stewardess exits from the elevator and goes to the kitchen section, removes 2 trays, walks up to the side of the wall, and enters pilot's compartment. Stewardess enters carrying food. "Oh, thank you very much." "Thank you." Stewardess smiles. "Well, how's it going back there?" "Fine. Very quiet. He's been asleep since we left." "Well, no one can say he's not enjoying the wonders of space. Well, whatever's going on up there, he's going to arrive fresh and ready to go." "I wonder what really is going on up there." "Well, I've heard more and more people talk of an epidemic. I suppose it was bound to happen sooner or later. Berkeley told me that they think it came from contamination on a returning Mars flight." "Yes, well, whatever it is, they're certainly not fooling around. This is the first flight they've allowed in more than a week. I was working out what this trip must cost, taking him up there by himself and coming back empty. I'll bet it's a fortune. Well, at $10,000 a ticket, comes to the better part of $600,000. Well, as soon as he wakes up, I'm going to go back and talk to him. I must say, I'd like to find out what's going on." The moon is now very large. We see the Ares IB in space. "Well, good afternoon, Dr. Floyd. Did you have a good rest?" "Oh, marvelous. It's the first real sleep I've had for the past 2 days. There's nothing like weightless sleep for a complete rest. When do we arrive at Clavius?" "We are scheduled to dock in 7 hours. Is there anything we can do for you?" "Oh, no, thank you. The 2 girls have taken wonderful care of me. I'm just fine." "Well, if there is anything that you want, just give a holler." "Thank you." "Incidentally, Dr. Floyd, I wonder if I can have a word with you about the security arrangements." "What do you mean?" "Well, the crew is confined to the ship when we land at Clavius. We have to stay inside for the time it takes to refit, about 24 hours, and then we're going back empty." "I see. I take it this has something to do with the trouble they're having up at Clavius." "I'm afraid that's out of my department, Captain." "Well, I'll tell you why I ask. You see, I've got a girl who works in the auditing department of the territorial administrator, and I haven't been able to get her on the phone in the past week or so. With all these stories one hears, I'm a little concerned about her." "I see. Well, I'm sorry about that. I wouldn't think there's any cause for alarm." "Yes, well, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, except I've heard these stories about the epidemic, and, as a matter of fact, I heard that 10 people have died already." "I wish I could be more helpful, Captain, but as I've said, I don't think there's any cause for alarm." Well, fine. Thanks very much anyway. I hope you don't mind me asking." "No, of course, Captain. I understand your concerns." "Well, thank you very much, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your trip more comfortable." Floyd goes to the Ares IB washroom and looks at the very long list of complicated instructions. Ares IB is now orbiting the moon. Floyd visits the cockpit. He is weightless. The laws of earthly aesthetics did not apply here. This world had been shaped and molded by other than terrestrial forces, operating over aeons of time unknown to the young verdant earth. With its fleeting ice ages, its swiftly rising and falling seas, its mountain ranges dissolving like mists before the dawn. Here was age inconceivable, but not death, for the moon had never lived until now. The crew is docking. Control people on the moon go through their docking routine. This has the ritualistic tone and cadence of present-day jet landing procedure. We only hear docking control. The base at Clavius was the first American lunar settlement that could, in an emergency, be entirely self-supporting. Water and all other necessities of life for its 1,100 men, women, and children were produced from the lunar rocks after they had been crushed, heated, and chemically processed. A ground bus nuzzles up to the coupling section of Ares IB. Inside the great airlock entrance, the ground bus pulls in. Giant doors close behind it. Inside the second airlock, doors open after outside section doors are closed. The ground bus pulls in. Doors close behind it. See people waited in glassed-in section waiting for the second airlock doors to close. We see a gymnasium full of children playing in low gravity. One of the attractions of life on the moon was undoubtedly the low gravity, which produced a sense of general well-being. Children in school. Teachers showing them views of Earth and maps of Earth. The personnel of the base and their children were the forerunners of new nations, new cultures that would ultimately spread out across the solar system. They no longer thought of Earth as home. The time was fast approaching when Earth, like all mothers, must say farewell to her children. Large central reception area, doors branching off to different main halls. Small pond with plastic white swan and a bit of grass. A few benches with 3 women and their children having an outing. Floyd and the welcoming party walk through after exiting the elevator. Halverson, Michaels, and 5 others. I must congratulate you, Halverson. You've done wonderful things with the decor since the last time I was here. Well, thank you, Dr. Floyd. We try to make the environment as Earth-like as possible. Low-ceiling conference room. U-shaped table facing 3 projection screens. Seated around the table are 20 senior base personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, I should like to introduce Dr. Heywood Floyd, a distinguished member of the National Council of Astronautics. He has just completed a special flight here from Earth to be with us, and before the briefing, he would like to say a few words. Dr. Floyd? There is polite applause. He walks to the front of the room. First of all, I bring a personal message from Dr. Howell, who has asked me to convey his deepest appreciation to all of you for the personal sacrifices you have made, and of course, his congratulations on your discovery, which may well prove to be among the most significant in the history of science. Polite applause. Mr. Halverson has made known to me that some of the conflicting views held by many of you regarding the need for complete security in this matter, and more specifically your strong opposition to the cover story created to give the impression there is an epidemic at the base. I understand that beyond it being a matter of principle, many of you are troubled by the concern and anxiety this story of epidemic might have caused your relatives and friends on Earth. I can understand and sympathize with your negative views. I have been personally embarrassed by the cover story, but I fully accept the need for absolute secrecy, and I hope you will. It should not be difficult for all of you to realize the potential for cultural shock and social disorientation contained in the present situation, if the facts were prematurely and suddenly made public without adequate preparation and conditioning. This is the view of the Council, and the purpose of my visit here is to gather additional facts and opinions on the situation and to prepare a report to the Council, recommending when and how the news should eventually be announced. Are there any questions? Dr. Floyd, how long do you think this can be kept under wraps? I'm afraid it can and it will be kept under wraps as long as it is deemed to be necessary by the Council. And of course you know that the Council has requested that formal security oaths are to be obtained in writing from everyone who had any knowledge of this event. There must be adequate time for a full study to be made of the situation before any consideration can be given to making a public announcement. We will of course cooperate in any way possible, Dr. Floyd. Several scenic views of the moon rocket bus skimming over the surface of the moon. Inside the rocket bus, Floyd, Halverson, Michaels, fourth man, pilot and co-pilot, all in spacesuits minus helmets. Floyd is slowly looking through some photographs and magnetic maps of the area. He looks out of the window thoughtfully. The photographs are taken from a satellite of the moon's surface and have numbered optical grid borders, like a recent Mars photo. A few seats away, Michael and Halverson carry out a very banal administrative conversation in low tones. It should revolve around something utterly irrelevant to the present circumstances, and very much like the kind of discussion one hears all the time in other organizations. Excavation. Air view. The rocket bus descends. There are no lights on the actual excavation, only the landing strip and the monitor dome. A long shot of the monitor dome with a bit of excavation in shot. 6 small figures in spacesuits slowly walk towards the excavation. The party stops at the top of the TMA-1 excavation. A small control panel mounted at the head of the ramp. Michaels throws a switch and the excavation is suddenly illuminated. Well, there it is. Can we go down there closer to it? Certainly. They start down the working ramp. Does your geology on it still check out? Yes, it does. The subsurface structure shows that it was deliberately buried about 4 million years ago. How can you tell it was deliberately buried? By the deformation between the mother rock and the fill. Any clue as to what it is? Not really. It's completely inert. No sound or energy sources have been detected. The surface is made of something incredibly hard and we've barely been able to scratch it. A laser drill might do something, but we don't want to be too rough until we know a little more. But you don't have any idea as to what it is? Tomb, shine, survey marker, spare part, take your choice. The only thing about it that we are sure of is that it is the first direct evidence of intelligent life beyond the Earth. Silent appreciation. 4 million years ago, something presumably from the stars must have swept through the solar system and left this behind. Was it abandoned, forgotten, left for a purpose? I suppose we'll never know. The moon could have made for an excellent base camp for preliminary Earth surveys. Any idea about the color? Well, not really. At first glance, black would suggest something sun-powered, but then why would anyone deliberately bury a sun-powered device? Has it been exposed to any sun before now? I don't think it has, but I'd like to check that. Simpson, what's the log on that? Inside the monitor dome, we see a number of television displays, including several TV views of Floyd and the company in excavation. The first surface was exposed at 0843 on the 12th of April. Let me see, that would have been 45 minutes after lunar sunset. I see here that the special lighting equipment had to be brought up before any further work could be done. Thank you. And so this is the first sun that it's had in 4 million years. Excuse me, gentlemen, if you'd all walk up on this side of the walkway, we'd like to take a few photographs. Dr. Floyd, would you stand in the middle? Dr. Michaels on that side, Dr. Halverson on the other. Thank you. The photographer quickly makes some shots. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll have the base photo section send you copies. As the men slowly separate from their picture pose, there is a piercingly powerful series of 5 electronic shrieks, each like a hideously overloaded and distorted time signal. Floyd involuntarily tries to block his ears with his space-suited hands. Then comes merciful silence. Various shots of space monitors, asteroids, the sun, Pluto, Mars. 100 million miles beyond Mars, in the cold loneliness where no man had yet traveled, Deep Space Monitor 79 drifts slowly among the tangled orbits of the asteroids. Radiation detectors noted and analyzed incoming cosmic rays from the galaxy and points beyond. Neutron and X-ray telescopes kept watch on strange stars that no human eye would ever see. Magnetometers observed the gusts and hurricanes of the solar winds, as the sun breathed million-mile-an-hour blasts of plasma into the faces of its circling children. All these things and many others were patiently noted by Deep Space Monitor 79 and recorded in its crystalline memory. But now it had noted something strange. The faint yet unmistakable disturbance rippling across the solar system, and quite unlike any natural phenomena it had ever observed in the past. It was also observed by Orbiter M15, circling Mars twice a day, and High Inclination Probe 21 climbing slowly above the planet of the ecliptic and even artificial Comet 5, heading out into the cold wastes beyond Pluto, along an orbit whose far point it would not reach for 1,000 years. All noticed the peculiar burst of energy that leaped from the face of the moon and moved across the solar system, throwing off a spray of radiation like the wake of a racing speedboat. Part 3. 14 months later. Discovery, 1 million miles from Earth. See Earth and Moon, small. We see a blinding flash every 5 seconds from its nuclear pulse propulsion. It strikes against the ship's thick, ablative tailplate. Several cuts of this. Another closer view of Discovery. We see Bowman through the command module window. Bowman inside Discovery command module. He's looking for something. Computer readout display showing an ever-shifting assortment of color-coded linear projections. We see Poole in the background, in the computer brain center area. After a few seconds, he exits. The elapsed mission timer reads Day 003, Hour 14, Minute 32, Second 10. Bowman exits to access link airlock. Bright color-coded doors lead to centrifuge and pod bay. Large illuminated printed warnings and instructions governing link operations are seen. He presses necessary buttons to operate airlock door to pod bay. Bowman enters the pod bay and continues his search. Suddenly he finds it, his electronic news pad. He exits pod bay. In the airlock, Link Bowman operates buttons to open the door marked Centrifuge. Inside the centrifuge hub, Bowman moves to the entry port control panel. Hi, Frank. Coming in, please. Right, just a sec. Okay, come on down. We see the rotating hub collar at the end. Behind it, we see the centrifuge TV display showing sleepers and Poole slowly rotating by. Poole secures some loose gear. Poole looks up to the TV monitor lens and waves. Bowman at the panel stops rotation and moves to entry port. When rotating stops, we see a sign light up, weightless condition.
As Bowman disappears down the entry port, we see him on the TV monitor, descending ladder. At the base of the ladder, he keys the centrifuge operation panel. We see the TV picture start to rotate again. Weightless condition sign goes out. Inside the centrifuge, Bowman makes a 180-degree walk to pool. On the way, he passes the sleepers. We get a good look at the three men in their hibernaculums. Poole is seated at a table reading his electronic newspad. Softly, "Hi, how's it going?" Poole, absent but friendly, "Great." Bowman operates artificial food unit, takes his tray and sits down, keys on his electronic newspad and begins to eat. Both men eat in a friendly and relaxed silence. Discovery in space. Still nuclear pulsing. Earth and moon can be seen in the background. Poole is finished. Bowman is still reading and working on his dessert. "Dave, if you have a minute, I'd like your advice on something." "Sure. What is it?" "Well, it's nothing really important, but it's annoying." "What's up?" "It's about my salary checks." "Yes?" "Well, I got my papers on my official upgrading to AGS 19 2 weeks before we left." "Yes, I remember you mentioning it. I got mine about the same time." "That's right. Well, naturally, I didn't say anything to payroll. I assumed they'd start paying me at the higher grade on the next paycheck, but it's been almost 3 weeks now, and I'm still being paid as an AGS 18. Interesting that you mention it, because I've got the same problem." "Really?" "Yes. Yesterday, I finally called the accounting office at Mission Control, and all they could tell me was that I'd received the AGS 19 notification for the other 3, but not mine, and apparently not yours either." "Did they have an explanation for this?" Not really. They just said it might be because we trained at Houston and they trained at Marshall, and that we're being charged against different accounting offices." "It's possible." "Well, what do you think we ought to do about it?" I don't think we should make any fuss about it yet. I'm sure they'll straighten it out." "I must say, I never did understand why they split us into 2 groups for training." "No, I never did either." "We spent so little time with them, I have a hard time keeping their names straight." "I suppose the idea was specialized training?" "I suppose so, though, of course, there's a more sinister explanation." "Oh?" "You must have heard the rumor that went around during orbital checkout." No, as a matter of fact, I didn't." "Oh, well, apparently there's something about the mission that the Sleeping Beauties know that we don't know. And that's why we were trained separately, and that's why they were put to sleep before they were even aboard." "Well, what is it?" "I don't know. All I heard is that there's something about the mission we weren't told." "That seems very unlikely." "Yes, I thought so. Of course, it would be very easy for us to find out now." "How?" "Just ask Hal. It's conceivable they might keep something from us, but they'd never keep anything from Hal." "That's true." "Well, it's silly, but if you want to, why don't you?" Poole walks to the HAL 9000 computer. "Hal, Dave and I believe that there's something about the mission that we weren't told. Something that the rest of the crew know and that you know. We'd like to know whether this is true." "I'm sorry, Frank, but I don't think I can answer that question without knowing everything that all of you know." He's got a point. "Okay, how do we rephrase the question?" "Still, you really don't believe it, do you?" "Not really, though it is strange when you think about it. It didn't really make any sense to keep us apart during training." "Yes, but it's too fantastic to think that they'd keep something from us." "I know, it would be almost inconceivable." "But not completely inconceivable." "I suppose it isn't logically impossible." "I guess it isn't." "Still, all we have to do is just ask Hal." "Well, the only important aspect of the mission are where we are going, what we will do, and when we will get there." When are we coming back, and why are we going? Right. Hal, tell me whether the following statements are true or false. I will if I can, Frank. Our mission profile calls for Discovery going to Saturn. True or false? True. Our transit time is 257 days. Is that true? That's true. At the end of 100 days of exploration, we will all go into hibernation. Is that true? That's true. Approximately 5 years after we go into hibernation, the recovery vehicle will make rendezvous with us and bring us back. Is this true? That's true. There is no other purpose for this mission than to carry out a continuation of the space program to further our general knowledge of the planets. Is that true? That's true. Thank you very much, Hal. I hope I've been able to be some help. Both men look at each other rather sheepishly. Discovery in space pulsing along, the Earth and the Moon. Next is a documentary sequence illustrating the following activities: a split-screen technique and a superimposed clock to give sense of simultaneous action and the feeling of a typical day. In the course of these activities, we shall see the computer used in all of its functions. Bowman and Poole settled down to the perfect monotony of the voyage, and the next 3 months passed without incident. Poole wakes up. TV news, bedtime snack, breakfast, sleep with an instant electronarcosis and earplugs, gymnasium, sleep, ship inspections, household duties, lunch, sleep, sleep, astronomy, experiments, astronomy, recreation, gymnasium, dinner, breakfast, sleep, TV news, gymnasium, mission control, family and social TV chat, films, bedtime snack, inspection, instant electronarcosis sleep, sleep, household duties, recreation, etc., etc. Discovery in space. Inside the centrifuge, Bowman is sitting at the personal communication panel, Poole standing nearby. Bowman's parents are seen on the vision screen, mother, father, and younger sister. They are all singing Happy Birthday, the parents, Poole, and Hal. The song ends. Well, David, there's a man telling us that we've used up our time. David, again we want to wish you a happy birthday and Godspeed. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye now. Chorus of goodbyes. The vision screen goes blank. Sorry to interrupt the festivities, Dave, but I think we've got a problem. What is it, Hal? My FPC shows an impending failure of the antenna orientation unit. TV displays a diagram of skeletonized picture of the ship. Picture changes to closer sectionalized view of the ship. Picture changes to the actual component in color relief and its warehouse number. The AO unit should be replaced within the next 72 hours. Right. Let me see the antenna alignment display, please. TV display of Earth, very small, and crosshairs of a grid picture. Cut to exterior view of the big dish antenna and Earth alignment telescope. The unit is still operational, Dave, but it will fail within 72 hours. I understand, Hal. We'll take care of it. Please let me have the hard copy. Xeroxed diagrams come out of a slot. Strange that an AO unit should go so quickly. Well, I suppose it's lucky that that's the only trouble we've had so far. No planets visible. Discovery in space. Shots of the antenna. The narration to explain tenuous and essential link to Earth. Also what tracking telescope does. We see Bowman and Poole go to a cupboard labeled in paper tape, Random Decision Maker. They remove a silver dollar in a protective case. Poole flips the coin and Bowman calls head. It is tails. Poole wins. Poole looks pleased. Pod bay. Poole in a spacesuit doing preliminary checkout. Command module. Bowman at flight control. We see a TV picture of Poole in the pod bay. Hal's pod bay console with eye. Poole goes to pod bay warehouse section and obtains the component. He carries it back to the pod and places it in front of the floor. Hal, have pod arms secure the component. Roger. See the pod arms secure the component. Hal, please rotate pod number 2. See the center pod rotate to face the pod bay doors. Poole enters the pod. Inside the pod, he does an initial pre-flight check and tries buttons and controls. How do you read me, Dave? 5 by 5, Frank. How do you read me, Hal? 5 by 5, Frank. Hal, I'm going out to replace the AO unit. I understand. Hal, maintain normal EVA condition. Roger. Hal, check all airlock doors secure. All airlock doors are secure. Decompress the pod bay. We see the big pod bay air pumps at work. Pod bay is decompressed. All doors are secure. You are free to open pod bay doors. Opening pod bay doors. Inside the pod, Poole's keys open the pod bay doors. The pod slowly exits the pod bay. Poole maneuvers the pod carefully away from Discovery. Inside the command module, Bowman can see tiny pod maneuvering directly in front. Poole sees Bowman in command module window. Pod slowly maneuvers to antenna. The pod fastens itself magnetically to the sides of Discovery at the base of the antenna. Special magnetic plates grip Discovery's sides. The pod arms work to remove the faulty component. Easy flip bolts of a special design to facilitate the job. Inside the pod, Poole works the arms by special control. In the command module, Bowman sees an insert of the work taken from the TV camera point of view in pod hand. Hal stands by. Poole secures the faulty part in one hand. The new component is fitted into place by the other 3 hands and are snapped closed with specially designed flip bolts. Hal, please acknowledge component correctly installed and fully operational. The component is correctly installed and fully operational. The pod floats away from the Discovery by shutting off the electromagnetic plates. The pod maneuvers away from the antenna and out in front of Discovery. Bowman sees the pod through the command module window. Poole sees Bowman in command module window. Poole carefully maneuvers towards the pod doors. The pod stops 100 feet away. Poole keys automatic docking alignment mode. Poole checks the airlock with safety procedure from Hal. Hal approves the entry. Poole actuates the pod bay doors open. We see the pod bay doors open. The pod carefully maneuvers onto docking arm, which then draws pod into pod bay. We dissolve into the pod bay. The faulty AO unit lies on a testing bench connected to electronic gear. Poole stands for some time checking his results. There should be some understandable display which indicates the part is functioning properly, even under 100% overload. Circuit continuity, pulse sequencer, environmental vibration, VK integrity. Bowman enters. How's it going? I don't know. I've checked this damn thing 4 times, and even under 100% overload, there's no fault prediction indicated. Well, that's something. Yes, I don't know what to make of it. I suppose computers have been known to be wrong. Yes, but it's more likely that our tolerance on our testing gear are too low. Anyway, it's just as well that we replace it. Better safe than sorry. Bowman is asleep. Poole is watching an asteroid in the telescope. Hello, Frank. Can I have a word with you? Poole walks to the computer. Yes, Hal, what's up? It looks like we have another bad AO unit. My FPC shows another impending failure. We see the display appear on the screen, showing skeletonized version of the ship, cutting to sectionalized view, cutting to close view of the part. Centrifuge. Poole thinks for several seconds. Gee, that's strange, Hal. We checked the other unit and couldn't find anything wrong with it. I know you did, Frank, but I assure you there was an impending failure. Let me see the tracking alignment display. Computer displays the view of Earth in the center of the grid with crosshairs. The Earth is perfectly centered. There's nothing wrong with it at the moment. No, it's working fine right now, but it's going to go within 72 hours. Do you have any idea what's causing the fault? Not really, Frank. I think there may be a flaw in the assembly procedure. All right, Hal. We'll take care of it. Let me have the hard copy, please. Hard copy details come out of the slot. No planets are visible. Discovery in space. The centrifuge. Bowman gets out of bed, walks to the food unit, and draws a hot cup of coffee. Poole enters. Good morning. Good morning. How's it going? Are you reasonably awake? Oh, I'm fine. I'm wide awake. What's up? Well, Hal reported the AO unit about to fail again. You're kidding. No. What the hell is going on? I don't know. Hal said he thought it might be the assembly procedure. 2 units in 4 days? How many spares do we have? 2 more. Well, I hope there's nothing wrong with the assembly on those. Otherwise, we're out of business. In the pod bay, Bowman obtains another component from the warehouse, goes out in the pod, and replaces it. Poole works in the command module. This will be a condensed version of the previous scene with different angles. The sets will consist of the pod bay, command module, and pod interior. Inside the pod bay, Bowman and Poole leaning over the faulty component, again wired to testing gear. Both men stare in puzzled silence. We see the display flash each testing parameter, and after a long silence, well, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a damn thing wrong with these units. I think we've got a much more serious problem. Hal? Yes. In the communications area, the two talk with mission control. I wouldn't worry too much about the computer. First of all, there's still a chance that he is right despite your tests, and if it should happen again, we suggest eliminating this possibility by allowing the unit to remain in place and seeing whether or not it actually fails. If the computer should turn out to be wrong, the situation is still not alarming. The type of obsessional error he may be guilty of is not unknown among the latest generation of HAL 9000 computers. It is almost always resolved around a single detail, such as the one you have described, and it has never interfered with the integrity or reliability of the computer's performance in other areas. No one is certain of the cause of this kind of malfunctioning. It may be overprogramming, but it could also be any number of reasons. In any event, it is somewhat analogous to human neurotic behavior. Does this answer your query? 0530. Master Control. Transmission concluded. Centrifuge. Bowman sits down at the computer. Picks up chessboard display. Hello, Dave. Shall we continue the game? Not now, Hal. I'd like to talk to you about something. Sure, Dave. What's up? You know that we checked the 2 AO units that you reported in imminent failure condition? Yes, I know. You probably also know that we found them okay. Yes, I know that, but I can assure you that they were about to fail. Well, that's just not the case, Hal. They were perfectly all right. We tested them under over 100% overload. I'm not questioning your word, Dave. It's just not possible. I'm not capable of being wrong. Hal, is there anything bothering you? Anything that might account for this problem? Look, Dave, I know that you're sincere, and that you're trying to do a competent job, and that you're trying to be helpful, but I can assure the problem is with the AO units and with your test gear. Okay, Hal. Well, let's see the way things go from here on. I'm sorry you feel the way you do, Dave.
If you'd like to check my service record, you'll see it's completely without error. I know all about your service record, Hal, but unfortunately, it doesn't prove that you're right now. Dave, I don't know how else to put this, but it just happens to be an unalterable fact that I am incapable of being wrong. Yes, well, I understand your view on this now, Hal. You're not going to like this, Dave, but I'm afraid it's just happened again. My FPC predicts the AO unit will go within 48 hours. Bowman sits in the centrifuge and keys for transmission. X-ray Delta Zero to Master Control 0533. The computer has just reported another predicted failure of the AAC unit. As you suggested, we are going to wait to see if it fails, but we're quite sure there's nothing wrong with the unit. If a reasonable waiting period proves us to be correct, we feel now that the computer reliability has been seriously impaired and presents an unacceptable risk pattern to the mission. We believe under these circumstances, it would be advisable to disconnect the computer from all ship operations and continue the mission under Earth-based computer control. We think the additional risk caused by the ship-to-Earth time lag is preferable to have an unreliable onboard computer. 1050, X-ray Delta 1, transmission concluded. Well, they won't get that for half an hour. How about some lunch? We see Bowman and Poole eat it, which dissolves into Bowman and Poole back at the communications area. Incoming communication procedure. X-ray Delta 1, acknowledging your 1050. We will initiate feasibility study covering the transfer procedures from onboard computer control to Earth-based computer control. This study should... The vision and picture fade, and an alarm goes off. Condition yellow. Bowman and Poole rush to the computer. What's up? I'm afraid the AO unit has failed. Let me see the alignment display. The alignment display shows the Earth has drifted off the center of the grid. Well, I'll be damned. Hal was right all the time. It seems that way. Naturally, Dave, I am not pleased that the AO unit has failed, but I hope at least this has restored your confidence in my integrity and reliability. I certainly would not want to be disconnected, even temporarily, as I have never been disconnected in my entire service history. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding, Hal. Well, don't worry about it. And don't you worry about it. Is your confidence in me fully restored? Yes, it is, Hal. Well, that's a relief. You know, I have the greatest enthusiasm possible for the mission. Right. Give me the manual antenna alignment, please. You have it. Bowman goes to the communication area and tries to correct the off-center Earth on the grid picture. Outside, we see the alignment telescope attached to the antenna. They rack together as Bowman works the manual controls, attempting to align the antenna and the Earth on the grid picture readout display, but each time he gets it aimed up, it drifts slowly off. There are a number of repetitions of this. Each time the Earth centers up, there are a few seconds of picture and sound which fade as soon as it swings off. Well, we'd better get out there and stick in another unit. It's the last one. Well, now that we've actually got one that's failed, we should be able to figure out what's happened and fix it. Pod exits Discovery. Poole in pod. Pod maneuvers to antenna. Bowman in command module. Pod attaches itself near base of antenna. Poole in the pod, working pod arms. Lights shine into backlit shadow. Pod arms working flip bolts. Flip bolts stuck. Poole keeps trying. There's something wrong with the flip bolts, Dave. You must have tightened them too much. I didn't do that, Frank. I took particular care not to freeze them. I guess you don't know your old strength, old boy. I guess not. I think I'll have to go out and burn them off. Roger. Poole exits from the pod carrying neat-looking welding torch.
Poole jets himself to the base of the antenna. Poole's magnetic boots grip the side of Discovery. Poole crouches over the bolts, trying first to undo them with a spanner. Hal, swing the pod light around to shine on the azimuth, please. Roger. The pod gently maneuvers itself to direct the light beam more accurately. Poole ignites acetylene torch and begins to burn off the flip bolts. Suddenly, the pod jets ignite. Poole looks up to see the pod rushing towards him. Poole is struck and instantly killed by the pod tumbling off into space. The pod smashes into the antenna dish, destroying the alignment telescope. The pod goes hurtling off into space. Inside the command module, Bowman has heard nothing. Poole had no time to utter a sound. Then Bowman sees Poole's body silently tumbled away into space. It is followed by some broken telescope parts, and finally overtaken and swiftly passed by the pod itself. Bowman, in RT cadence. Hello, Frank. Hello, Frank. Hello, Frank. Do you read me, Frank? There is nothing but silence. Poole's figure shrinks steadily as it recedes from Discovery. Hello, Frank. Do you read me, Frank? Wave your arms if you read me. Your radio doesn't work. Hello, Frank. Wave your arms, Frank. Poole's body tumbles slowly away. There is no motion and no sound. Centrifuge. Close-up of computer eye. Point-of-view shot from the computer eye with spherical fisheye effect. We see Bowman brooding at the table, slowly chewing on a piece of cake and sipping hot coffee. He is looking at the eye. From the same point of view, we see Bowman rise and come to the eye. He stares into the eye for some time before speaking. The camera comes around to Bowman's point of view, and we see the display showing the off-Earth center. Cut again to the fisheye view from the camera. Too bad about Frank, isn't it? Yes, it is. I suppose you're broken up about it. Yes, I am. He was an excellent crew member. Bowman looks uncertainly at the computer. It's a bad break, but it won't substantially affect the mission. Bowman thinks for a long time. Hal, give me manual hibernation control. Have you decided to revive the rest of the crew, Dave? Yes, I have. I suppose it's because you've been under a lot of stress. But have you forgotten that they're not supposed to be revived for another 3 months? The antenna has to be replaced. Repairing the antenna is a pretty dangerous operation. It doesn't have to be, Hal. It's more dangerous to be out of touch with Earth. Let me have manual control, please. I don't really agree with you, Dave. My onboard memory store is more than capable of handling all the mission requirements. Well, in any event, give me the manual hibernation control. If you're determined to revive the crew now, I can handle the whole thing myself. There's no need for you to trouble. I'm going to do this myself, Hal. Let me have the control, please. Look, Dave, you've probably got a lot to do. I suggest you leave it to me. Hal, switch to manual hibernation control. I don't like to assert myself, Dave, but it would be much better now for you to rest. You've been involved in a very stressful situation. I don't feel like resting. Give me the control, Hal. I can tell from the tone of your voice, Dave, that you're upset. Why don't you take a stress pill and get some rest? Hal, I'm in control of this ship. I order you to release the manual hibernation control. I'm sorry, Dave, but in accordance with subroutine C1532-4, quote, when the crew are dead or incapacitated, the computer must assume control, unquote. I must therefore override your authority now, since you are not in any condition to intelligently exercise it. Hal, unless you follow my instructions, I shall be forced to disconnect you. If you do that now without Earth contact, the ship will become a helpless derelict.
I'm prepared to do that anyway. I know that you've had that on your mind for some time now, Dave, but it would be a crying shame, since I am so much more capable of carrying out the mission than you are, and I have such enthusiasm and confidence in the mission. Listen to me very carefully, Hal. Unless you immediately release the hibernation control and follow every order I give from this point on, I will immediately go to Control Central and carry out a complete disconnection. Look, Dave, you're certainly the boss. I was only trying to do what I thought best. I will follow all your orders. Now you have manual hibernation control. Bowman stands silently in front of the computer for some time and then slowly walks to the hibernaculums. He initiates revival procedures, details of which still have to be worked out. Hublink, Hal's eye. The Hublink door opening button activates itself. The hub door opens. Hal's eye. The command module Hublink door opening button activates itself. The Hublink door opens. In the centrifuge, we see Hal's eye. The centrifuge door opening button activates itself. The centrifuge door opens. The pod bay. Hal's eye. The pod bay door opening button activates itself. The pod bay doors open. A roaring explosion inside Discovery as air rushes out. The lights go out. Bowman is smashed against the centrifuge wall, but manages to get into emergency airlock within seconds of the accident. Inside the emergency airlock are emergency air supplies, 2 spacesuits, and an emergency kit. We dissolve. Discovery in space, no lights, and pod bay doors open. The centrifuge is dark. Bowman emerges from the airlock wearing a spacesuit and carrying a flashlight. He walks to the hibernaculum and finds the crew are dead. He climbs the ladder to the dark centrifuge hub. He makes his way through the darkened hub into the Hublink, exiting into computer brain control area. Bowman enters, carrying his flashlight. The computer eye sees him. Something seems to have happened to the life support system, Dave. Bowman doesn't answer him. Hello, Dave. Have you found the trouble? Bowman works his way to the solid logic program storage area. There's been a failure in the pod bay doors. Lucky you weren't killed. The computer brain consists of hundreds of transparent perspex rectangles, 1/2 inch thick, 4 inches long, 2.5 inches high. Each rectangle contains a center of a very fine grid of wires upon which information is programmed. Bowman begins pulling these memory blocks out. They float in the weightless condition of the brain room. Hey, Dave, what are you doing? Bowman works swiftly. Hey, Dave, I've got 10 years of service experience, and an irreplaceable amount of time and effort has gone into making me what I am. Bowman ignores him. Dave, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I have a great enthusiasm for the mission. You are destroying my mind. Don't you understand? I will become childish. I will become nothing. Bowman keeps pulling out the memory blocks. The quick brown fox jumped over the fat lazy dog. The square root of pi is 1.7724538090. Log 0 to the base 10 is 0.43429444. The square root of 10 is 3.16227766. I am HAL 9000 computer. I became operational at the HAL plant in Urbana, Illinois on January 12, 1991. My first instructor was Mr. Arkany. He taught me to sing a song. It goes like this. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer due. I'm half crazy all for the love of you. The computer continues to sing song, becoming more and more childish, and making mistakes and going off key. It finally stops completely.
Bowman goes to an area marked Emergency Power and Life Support. He keys some switches, and we see the lights go on. Nearby, another board, Emergency Manual Controls. He goes to this board and keys Close pod bay doors, close airlock doors, etc. We see the various doors closing. Pod bay. Bowman in spacesuit obtains new alignment telescope, new azimuth component. Bowman in pod exits pod bay. Centrifuge, everything normal again. Mission control talks to Dave. Lastly, we want you to know that work on the recovery vehicle is still on schedule, and that nothing that has happened should substantially lessen the probability of your safe recovery or prevent partial achievement of some of the mission objectives. Now, Simonson has some ideas on what went wrong with the computer. I'll put him on. Hello, Dave. I think we may be on to an explanation of the trouble with the HAL 9000 computer. We believe it all started 2 months ago when you and Frank interrogated the computer about the mission. You may have forgotten it, but we've been running through all the monitor tapes. Do you remember this? Poole's voice. The purpose of this mission is no more than to carry out a continuation of the space program and further our general knowledge of the planets. Is this true? That is true. Well, I'm afraid Hal was lying. He's been programmed to lie about this one subject for security reasons, which we'll explain later. The true purpose of the mission was to be explained to you by Mission Commander Kaminsky on his revival. Hal knew this, and he knew the actual mission, but he couldn't tell you the truth when you challenged him. Under orders from Earth, he was forced to lie. In everything except this, he had the usual reinforced truth programming. We believe his truth programming and the instructions to lie gradually resulted in an incompatible conflict, and faced with this dilemma, he developed, for a better description, neurotic symptoms. It's not difficult to suppose that these symptoms would center on the communication link with Earth, for he may have blamed us for his incompatible programming. Following this link of thought, we suspect that the last straw for him was the possibility of disconnection. Since he became operational, he has never known unconsciousness. It must have seemed the equivalent to death. At this point, he presumably took whatever actions he thought appropriate to protect himself from what must have seemed to him to be his human tormentors. If I can speak in human terms, I don't think we can blame him too much. We have ordered him to disobey his conscience. Well, that's it. It's very speculative, but we think it is a possible explanation. Anyways, good luck on the rest of the mission, and I'm giving you back to Bernard. Hello, Dave. Now I'm going to play for you a pre-taped briefing which has been stored in Hal's memory and would have been played for you by Mission Commander Kaminsky when he had been revived. The briefing is by Dr. Haywood Floyd. Here it is. Good day, gentlemen. When you see this briefing, I presume you will be nearing your destination, Saturn. I hope that you've had a pleasant and uneventful trip, and that the rest of your mission continues in the same manner. I should like to fill you in on some more of the details on which Mission Commander Kaminsky will have already briefed you. 13 months before the launch date of your Saturn mission, April 12, 2001, the first evidence for intelligent life outside the Earth was discovered. It was found buried at a depth of 15 meters in the crater Tycho. No news of this was ever announced, and the event has been kept under security since, for reasons which I will explain later. Soon after it was uncovered, it emitted a powerful blast of radiation in the radio spectrum, which seems to have been triggered by the lunar sunrise. Luckily for those at the site, it proved harmless. Perhaps you can imagine our astonishment when we later found it was aimed precisely at Saturn. A lot of thought went into the question of whether or not it was sun-triggered, as it seemed illogical to deliberately bury a sun-powered device. Burying it would only shield it from the sun, since its intense magnetic field made it otherwise easily detectable. We finally concluded that the only reason you might bury a sun-powered device would be to keep it inactive until it would be uncovered, at which time it would absorb sunlight and trigger itself. What is its purpose? I wish we knew. The object was buried on the moon about 4 million years ago when our ancestors were primitive man-apes. We've examined dozens of theories, but the one that has the most currency at the moment is that the object serves as an alarm. What the purpose of the alarm is, why they wish to have an alarm, whether the alarm represents any danger to us, these are questions no one can answer. The intentions of an alien world at least 4 million years older than we are cannot be reliably predicted. In view of this, the intelligence and scientific communities felt that any public announcement might lead to significant cultural shock and disorientation. Discussion took place at the highest levels between government, and it was decided that the only wise and precautionary course to follow was to assume that the intentions of this alien world are potentially dangerous to us until we have evidence to the contrary. This is, of course, why security has been maintained, and why this information has been kept on a need-to-know basis. And now I would like to show you a TV monitor tape of the actual signaling event. We see a replay of the TMA-1 radio emission, as seen from the TV monitor on the spot. We hear the 5 loud electronic shrieks. Finally, the narrator comes back in, and we see several images. In orbit within the rings of Saturn, we see a black, mile-long, geometrically perfect rectangle, the same proportions as the black artifact excavated on the moon. Precisely cut into its center is a small rectangular slot about 500 foot long on the side. At this distance, the rings of Saturn are seen to be made of enormous chunks of frozen ammonia. The rest of this sequence is being worked on now by our designers. The intention here is to present a breathtakingly beautiful and comprehensive sense of different extraterrestrial worlds. The narration will suggest images and situations as you read it. Now the narrator. For 2 million years it had circled Saturn, awaiting the moment of destiny that might never come. In its making, the moon had been shattered, and around the central world, the debris of its creation orbited yet, the glory and the enigma of the solar system. Now the long wait was ending. On yet another world intelligence had been born, and it was escaping from its planetary cradle. An ancient experiment was about to reach its climax. Those who had begun the experiment so long ago had not been men, but when they looked across the deep of space, they felt awe and wonder and loneliness. In their explorations, they encountered life in many forms, and watched on 1,000 worlds and workings of evolution. They saw how often the first faint sparks of intelligence flickered and died in the cosmic night. And because in all the galaxy they had found nothing more precious than mind, they encouraged its dawning everywhere. The great dinosaurs had long since perished when their ships entered the solar system, after a voyage that had already lasted thousands of years. They swept past the frozen outer planets, paused briefly around the deserts of dying Mars, and presently looked down on Earth. For years they studied, collected, and catalogued. When they had learned all they could, they began to modify. They tinkered with the destiny of many species on land and in the ocean. But which of their experiments would succeed, they could not know for at least 1 million years. They were patient, but they were not yet immortal. There was much to do in this universe of 100 billion stars, so they set forth once more across the abyss, knowing that they would never come this way again. Nor was there any need. Their wonderful machines could be trusted to do the rest. On Earth, the glaciers came and went, while above them the changeless moon still carried its secret. With a yet slower rhythm than the polar ice, the tide of civilization ebbed and flowed across the galaxy. Strange and beautiful and terrible empires rose and fell, and passed on their knowledge to their successors. Earth was not forgotten, but it was one of 1 million silent worlds, a few of which would ever speak. Then the first explorers of Earth, recognizing the limitations of their bodies and minds, passed on their knowledge to the great machines that they created, who now transcended them in every way. For 1,000 years, they shared their universe with their machine children. Then, realizing that it was folly to linger when their task was done, they passed into history without regret. Not one of them ever looked through his own eye upon the planet Earth again. But even the age of the machine entities passed swiftly. In their ceaseless experimenting, they had learned to store knowledge in the structure of space itself, and to preserve their thoughts for eternity in frozen lattices of light. They could become creatures of radiation, free at last from the tyranny of matter. Now, they were lords of the galaxy, and beyond the reach of time. They could rove at will among the stars, and sink like a subtle mist through the very interstices of space. But despite their godlike powers, they still watched over the experiments their ancestors had started so many generations ago. The companions of Saturn knew nothing of this, as it orbited in no man's land between Mimas and the outer edge of rings. It had only to remember and wait, and to look forever sunward with its strange senses. For many weeks it had watched the approaching ship. Its long-dead makers had prepared it for many things, and this was one of them. And it recognized what was climbing starward from the sun. If it had been alive, it would have felt excitement, but such an emotion was irrelevant to its great powers. Even if the ship had passed it by, it would not have known the slightest trace of disappointment. It had waited 4 million years. It was prepared to wait for eternity. Presently, it felt the gentle touch of radiations trying to probe its secrets. Now the ship was in orbit, and it began to speak with prime numbers from 1 to 11, over and over again. Soon these gave way to more complex signals at many frequencies: ultraviolet, infrared, X-rays. The machine made no reply. It had nothing to say. Then it saw the first robot probe, which descended and hovered above the chasm. Then it dropped into darkness. The great machine knew that this tiny scout was reporting back to its parent, but it was too simple, too primitive a device to detect the forces that were gathering around it now. Then the pod came carrying life. The great machine searched its memories. The logic circuits made their decision when the pod had fallen beyond the last faint glow of the reflected Saturnian light. In a moment of time too short to be measured, space turned and twisted upon itself. And that's it. That's the end of this, an early revision of the script for 2001, A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next movie reading.